Hello everyone. My guest today is Chris Redig, a very fit and interesting guy. He's doing every different kind of sports, from strength training to endurance races. He's a busy dad of two kids, and he's over 40, but I would say he's more fit than most of the guys in their 20s. I thought it would be nice to talk about his lifestyle and fitness routine, how we can manage everything and learn from him. So, hi Chris, let me
Hey,
tell me more about yourself. How did you end up in this fitness world? Why are you doing these things? Where are you living?
yeah, absolutely. Hey, thanks so much for inviting me. Super happy to be here and talking about all this. And yeah, so well, I guess how did I get into fitness? I think like a lot of guys who's old like myself, I grew up and saw like Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger and all those guys on TV, and I always thought it was cool, but I never really was super serious about it. In high school, I lifted weights casually and all through my 20s. Um, Not really very effective at any of it, and everything changed for me when I met my wife. I was in my early 30s, and I could kind of forecast that I was going to be having kids pretty late in life. I'm 44 now, and my daughter's 8, and my son's 5. And I kind of had this vision in my head in my early 30s of being kind of a broken down old man with young kids, and I did not want that. Um, I always say like I started feeling my age in my early 30s, and that just pretty much scared me. So I obsessed about it. I cleaned up my diet kind of slowly through trial and error. I got into strength training, and then a bit later I got into like MoveNat and endurance. And yeah, it went from being a thing I thought I should do to something I became obsessed about. To now I'm a coach and train constantly and do kind of some more challenging races than I think most people get the opportunity to track. So it's been quite the journey.
Yeah, sounds very interesting and inspiring. And I'm sure you were trying many different training methods and lifestyle practicing diets. What do you think which was worth to keep it in the long run? Which was garbage, I would say, not worth your time, like supplements or diet or training
Yeah, sure. I mean, we could even kind of go through it maybe through categories. Like I think one of the things I was initially interested in trying to figure out was my diet. I wanted to lose some weight. I wasn't like full blown fat or anything like that, I suppose, but in the end, I've lost maybe 20 or 30 pounds, so that's a bit. And I tried just about everything. I think over the years, I tried keto for a while at one point. One of the first things I did was I read Born to Run, got super inspired, started eating a salad for breakfast, and that kind of took me down the rabbit hole of eating lots of whole foods and almost kind of vegetarian-ish. Um, I did Primal quite a bit, and that definitely helped quite a lot as well. But where I'm at right now, and what seems to really work for me, is a balanced diet. I don't worry very much about like keeping track of my macros as long as I'm getting enough protein. Um, so it's pretty even split, maybe like 33%, protein, 33% carbs, 33% fat, something like that. Um, and I eat still a pretty whole foods diet just because it kind of helps with my appetite and keeps that at bay. Um, yeah, so that's probably the journey as far as diet goes. As far as training goes, I started off, I suppose, with calisthenics, worked through a lot of strength training. My first efforts at getting into running did not go well. Like I said, I got inspired by Born to Run, and I tried to do a lot of barefoot running. I ran my first marathon actually in 2019, I guess, and I did it in a pair of those Vibram 5 finger shoes. And I can't say that it was a disaster. I mean, I got it done and all that, but I've kind of switched now. I still wear minimalist inspired shoes. I use Ultras, but they're padded now. Maybe it's also just a symptom of being an old man, but that's definitely a big change for me. Um, yeah, I suppose those kind of sort of the broad outlines. I've definitely spent more and more of my time is getting taken up with endurance as I get older, I think, but I still keep strength training as my priority.
Okay, so you mentioned strength training, endurance training. and why they are good for your health or longevity. I think they are two different words, but the studies say we need both. So how do you manage these two different training styles together? Because I know it's a big challenge. They have different adaptation signals for your body. If you not mix them properly, then it can be a big disaster, chaos for the nervous system.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess I'd start by saying, like, if someone's new to fitness, they probably can just dive all in. And for the first, several months anyway, I don't think it makes much of a difference. People who first start running actually build muscle. People who first start lifting weights, they improve their cardio. But what ends up happening is that the adaptations are on the same pathway. And so if you send a really strong, endurance signal at the same time that you send a really strong strength training signal, they kind of just wash each other out. They compete, and you kind of don't really do much of either. So for the way I kind of manage that for myself is, there's a few things. One is you have to kind of take an honest look at where you're at and how much you can handle, because all stress is kind of accumulative. So, when I had newborn babies, I wasn't trying to do, a ton of cardio and a ton of strength training at the same time. I was mostly just doing strength training, just because the more stress you add to your life, the harder it is to really do anything, I suppose. Another thing would be that I really look across like a year or two, and I try to decide what I'm going to try to do. So if I sign up for an Ironman, then my strength training is on maintenance, and I probably do 4 to 6 sets max per muscle group per week, just to try to hold on to what I have in terms of strength and size. Conversely, like if I don't have a race that I'm signed up for, or if it's in the winter and it's kind of like an off season, I will put all my endurance work on maintenance, maybe 3 to 4 hours a week, and I will, just really focus on whether it's trying to build strength for a specific exercise or build some muscle somewhere or something like that. So that's part of it too, is just looking at that big macro, periodization point of view. As far as like week to week, it also really matters to separate your strength training and your cardio. You don't want to do them both on the same day if you can avoid it. And if you are going to do them on the same day, it helps to separate them. Like if you could do like your strength training in the morning and your cardio in the evening, or vice versa. Again, depending on what your priority is, you might, decide what you're going to do when. So if you're trying to build muscle, or build strength, I would do the strength training first thing, and the cardio, later in the day, just so you can hit the strength training while you're fresh and you got lots of energy and you're ready to go out there and kick some ass. Yeah, I think those are probably some of the broader outlines of how I approach it. Another interesting thing about doing, mixing the modalities, doing some strength training and some cardio is, for someone, at least like for me, big motivation I've had throughout my fitness journey has been longevity, right? I have, younger kids, older guy, younger wife, and, trying to stay fit and healthy for as long as I possibly can has been a major motivation. And, you look at the research, and they actually, size and strength and endurance, they are individually advantageous to longevity, right? You want both. And, like for strength training, there's all kinds of studies that even just getting into the gym and lifting weights like twice a week can, if I remember correctly, for people of all ages, it reduces your risk of premature death by like 20%. And then once you hit like older age, like over 50, I think it's like 40%. Similarly, and even more shockingly, like for endurance, they've got several studies over the last maybe 6-7 years, something like that, that look at its effect on longevity. And two in particular, they looked at VO2 max, which is just a measure of cardio fitness. And they broke the population down by how fit they were. So if you were like elite level VO2 max, so like in the top 2.5%, that would be one category. And then maybe the bottom 25% was the unfit category, right? And the first study that looked at this found that the people in the elite category were 5 times less likely to die than the people in the bottom 25%. And even in the research paper, they literally point out that the difference between being a smoker and a non-smoker is smaller, right? So, if you stop smoking for your health, it doesn't have as big of an effect on your chances of premature death as the difference between being like completely unfit versus elite level cardio. So that's staggering, right? And the interesting thing is that they work cooperatively. So the things that make you live longer with cardio are related to your cardiovascular health, right? Obviously. Whereas with strength training, it's like, say you break a hip, well, like how much muscle mass you have is going to influence like your ability to recover from that. Same thing with cancer. People with more muscle mass do better, like, getting through chemo and stuff like that. And strength training also, like I think one of the top 5 causes of death when you get, say, above 70 or something like that is just falling down, right? You fall down, you break a hip, you go to the hospital, you just never quite recover, and 2 years later you're dead. So strength training just keeps you more robust, right? You can just keep doing stuff. You're not going to like fall down as easily. If you do fall down, you're not landing straight on bone. So yeah, I mean that's one of my big motivations. I mean, I like to do Ironman races. I like to strength train, but in the back of my head too, it's just like I'd like to be here for a while for my kids.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan and for everyone to accept the same. Staying long and fit, a good example. And yeah, one thing is being strong to avoid the falling and accidents, traveling with more chance. And the other aspect is the cardiovascular health for your circulation. And I would add to this the movement skills, like what you can practice in the natural movement system, for example. I've seen many people, they are afraid of certain movements because they are never practicing it and it's not there in the nervous system. What do you think
definitely.
About broad movement skills, what you can do? Practice other things or only just cyclical sports?
Well, if I could, I'd even say just, bringing up the idea of natural movement and like longevity. There's been several studies now in that direction too, like looking at like things like your balance, your ability to like get up or down from the floor without your hands, grip strength, different things that you would get from like lots of like, movement that all correlate with reduced risks of death as you age. So that's like, I mean, it's intuitive, it makes sense just kind of looking at it, but it's also something that you can actually see in the research. And then, they've also done studies where they look at like the blue zone populations. So it's the parts of the world where there's a really high percentage of people who live up to 100, right? So, and when you look at those populations, they do lots of natural movement. Like they're just moving constantly. They're in their gardens, they're riding their bikes. As they get older, they're still walking. They're using their hands, just doing stuff all day, every day. They're carrying groceries home from the store. So like the longer you can do all of that, definitely the better.
Yeah. I was reading also this study when correlate the grip strength with the longevity or the get up from the floor.
Yeah.
You can do it without hands or you need support. That's a good prediction.
Yeah, it's tough to do without hands until you've practiced a bit, and then you have to have enough strength and mobility to do it. But it's something that, like, if you went to, I don't know, some hunter-gatherer tribe in Papua New Guinea or something like that, probably you could find the average, 70-year-old could probably do it, right? So it's something you should be able to do until you're quite old. It's just not something that modern people have much experience with.
All right, so it's already have the mobility component, flexibility, and how do you keep it in a good condition, your joint mobility, or you do different special training session for this, or it's included in your strength training routine somehow?
Yeah. So I got obsessed early on with like flexibility and mobility, like gymnastic strength training type stuff. I was trying to do like middle splits and front split, never got there. But right now I don't really have anything set aside for that. I try to incorporate it all with my strength training. So like for hamstring flexibility, I do like Romanian deadlifts, and they've actually, again, there's pretty strong scientific evidence that, variety of studies looking at this, showing that if you do an exercise and you take it to the end point where you're stretching the muscle, you get something called stretch mediated hypertrophy, which actually lengthens the muscle. Like it actually gets longer, right? You can do that with some stretching protocols, but it's like weighted stretching and very intense. In fact, I saw recently there was a study that just came out, I think within the last year, comparing like stiff-legged or Romanian deadlifts versus like practicing sitting and reaching out past your toes, right? And then the test was who could reach past their toes the furthest. And the people doing Romanian deadlifts, even though they didn't practice that at all, they gained as much flexibility as the people who spent all their time just practicing being flexible. And again, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense intuitively. I mean, if you're sitting there and you got this huge weight, and every single rep you take it all the way to the stretch and then back, it's just stretch. You're stretching during your strength training. So I try to incorporate a ton of that. And then on top of that, what I do, and it's not like a formal system, but I do like natural movement. As I try to just work it into my life. If I'm playing with the kids, I make sure I get up without my hands. If I'm sitting on the floor with the kids, I try to stretch, pancake stretch or whatever. I like to obstacle course race, so I definitely get some time hanging, and I'll practice hanging. And that definitely does a lot to stretch as well. So I still get it, but it's not, I don't have like a plan, I guess would be the way to say it.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so it's possible to incorporate somehow in your training the mobility, flexibility aspect of fitness.
You're not going to get super far that way, but I mean, you're never going to, my flexibility is less than it used to be, for sure. I get reduced, but it's plateaued now. And I mean, I can touch my toes standing, those kinds of things that, the basics, right? I haven't bumped in anywhere where I'm like, oh man, I wish I was more flexible. Now, if I was into like mixed martial arts or gymnastics or, ballet or whatever, like there's all kinds of sports and things where it's like you need flexibility. If I was into, like the really cool calisthenic movements, right? Like you have to have really good flexibility for that, and you have to be strong in all positions. I don't have that because I don't do it, right? So, there's all kinds of areas where, like a really thought through and well programmed strength training, stretching protocol is necessary. But for me, I'm kind of like just like the broken down old man who just like gets through the obstacle course race, and I don't need to be too showy about it. So I don't have a lot of beautiful strength, let's say.
Yeah, so it depends on your goals. Now your goal is more finishing good in the Ironman, for example, or obstacle race.
Yeah.
Or you don't need a ton of ballerina flexibility.
No, exactly.
But probably the ballet dancer would not be able to do the Ironman without preparation. 1 year, half year. So, right. So it's about the priorities. But in general, for general fitness, I think we need all of them for a good level. And yeah, a bit back to the strength and endurance training. So they're a bit two different worlds and hard to train for them simultaneously. What would you not recommend? How not to do it together? For example, in one training session, mixing them together, or weekly basis?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'd say, first of all, like, don't do the opposite of the things I recommended doing, right? Like, you don't want to, in a perfect world, it'd be better to separate your training and the things we discussed. Some of the common mistakes, I guess, I see, like one of the most common mistakes I see is probably just overdoing it in general. Like I said, that the stresses that you put on your body are cumulative. So you kind of have to pay attention, I suppose, more than anything, and notice like, okay, like my training's not going good. I'm losing strength, or I'm not getting fitter or faster. Like, why is that? Right? Because you can grind for a long time past the point of doing yourself some good. Like you wake up in the morning, you lift weights, you're no stronger, maybe you're even a little weaker, And then in the evening you go out and you run 5 or 6 miles and it feels awful, but you push through it because you're hard like that and you're just trying to, chase your performance and everything. And nothing's really progressing, then you're probably overtraining. That's, I guess that's maybe the main thing is just getting really good at if you're gonna go down the road where you're gonna try and get really good at both strength and endurance, you probably should be really good at looking for the signs of overtraining. So like for strength training, if you're getting weaker, you're overtraining. Something's wrong. You should never be getting weaker. And for endurance, it's kind of the same thing. If you're just starting to fall off on your performance, something's got to be wrong.
Yeah, it's a good indicator.
Yeah. But a lot of people do it, man. They just run right into that wall and they get frustrated because things aren't working. And it's just, another thing too would be like, when your joints start to ache. That's a big one for me. That's one of the ones that almost always is the place where I have to dial things back. It's like, okay, I went for a run today and my Achilles tendon started hurting or my knee started hurting. It's like, yeah, that's probably a sign I'm doing too much. I have to figure something out, dial it back somewhere, the intensity or the volume or something. And the same thing for like lifting, if your joints start to hurt, it's probably a sign that you're going to start to bump into the place where you're going to have to pull back. And I mean, I should maybe add a caveat, again, I'm 44, right? If you're 20 years old, it's different for sure. Your body recovers in a different sort of a way. But for me, like if I start seeing anything that's nagging pain of any sort, it's like, okay, pay attention, might be time to restructure things a little bit.
Yeah, it's a smart way to train, listen to your body.
Yeah, and I've learned the hard way, man. I've never had a big difficult injury, but I've overtrained my tendons plenty of times, my connective tissues. It's so frustrating because then it's like, okay, now I got 3 or 4 months of like my elbow hurting or my shoulder hurting or my knee hurting, and yeah, that's not fun.
Yeah, me too. I had these experiences when I was in my teeny or 20s years. That was easy. We overtrained myself. Not listening to the small signs. Yeah, at the end, my performance was not improving. I had to skip a few days or a few weeks even sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard.
Pay attention
it's not fun.
to the signs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what about the family life and training? For sure, you need to plan every day, and every day you also need to change the plan because like this, how many times in a week you can train and what advices you have for fit dads who want to still high level trainings?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think one of the things you just said, which is really important, is probably planning, right? Thinking ahead at what you can actually achieve and being somewhat realistic about it. I know like when my kids were babies, well, like for example, when my son was born, I decided I was going to try to bulk because I knew I was going to be home. I was going to put on a bunch of muscle mass, but like I wasn't sleeping, of course, because I had a newborn baby and the stress was really high. And so like total disaster, didn't work at all. And I knew what I was doing at that point. Like I was already, but just, it was an unrealistic thing to ask myself to do. So yeah, like thinking ahead and planning it all out, it's huge. Thinking like, like how is your week going to actually go and what can you actually achieve with it? One of the things that I do a lot right now is I integrate as much as I can with my kids as possible. So my strength training is usually with my son, sometimes with my daughter too. And I do that like right now I strength train maybe 4 days a week, but they're shorter sessions and I just do it with my kids. And it works great. My son likes to play on the gymnastic rings. So even if I'm not going to be using them for that session, I set them up for him. He likes to lift weights. We actually have a couple of we have a little tiny kettlebell for him and a couple of little hand weights for him. It's not like structured. He's 5 years old. I'm not training him or anything like that, but he's seeing what I'm doing. He emulates. I kind of help make sure that it's safe. And that he's doing it, as close to the right way as he has an interest in trying to do. But it's kind of instilling in him, I think, a love of strength training already. You could see it. Like he tries to go down and do one arm push-ups in front of people sometimes randomly and different things like that. He can do an L-sit now, which is pretty cool on the floor, which is fun to see. And he did his first almost chin up, maybe maybe 4 months ago. It was like so close. He was like right, almost there. And then I recently, just this summer, started doing my runs with my kids, and my wife comes along sometimes now too. And they're shorter distance and like zone 2, like a slower pace, but it's pretty cool. It's fun. And I can talk to them, and we have some trails behind the house, like some dirt trails. They can go on their mountain bikes and just cycle along with me. And I was telling them maybe I would do a marathon next summer, and we could try to build up their cycle along with my run. So that's fun. But yeah, I mean, if you could integrate it, man, that's a game changer, and that doesn't have to be running and lifting weights either. It could be like hikes, right? Go for hikes with the family. Could be a movement practice. Kids love stuff like natural movement type stuff. So you could like go out, and that's super easy, man. You'll have a meeting out of your hands doing that. Yeah, I suppose that's probably the main things. When I train for an Ironman, it's a complete and totally different thing. It's a disaster. And yeah, you have to plan ahead, do everything in the mornings you can, or at night. Your wife has to be a complete saint. Yeah, I can't do an Ironman every year because of that. Like, it doesn't really make sense for my priorities. So I'm not doing one this year, but hopefully again next year. I really enjoy them.
It's a daily challenge how to manage, but you can do it, I think. Showing a good example for the kids, and they develop this good habit to training every day, doing some sports. For sure, they will do Ironmans later in their age.
I hope I can do it with them.
Yeah, you can go together. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I'll be somewhere in the back, obviously, but that's cool.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you how long you want to maintain this fit lifestyle, or what are your goals with this? I guess, yeah, forever.
Yeah, I mean, as long as I possibly can, right?
He's 80 years old and still going for competitions. You are this type of guy.
I will see what I can do. My expectation right now is to go for as long as I possibly can. I did on one of my half Ironmans. There was a 83-year-old gentleman, and he was just cruising along, and that was wild to see. I think, man, I don't know if I can do that, but I'm going to try. I feel like I still have some progress still left ahead of me. I don't think I've peaked quite yet because I started so late in life getting fit. So, 44, I would have peaked if I was an athlete when I was young, but I wasn't. So I still have some things I think I have left I can do that I haven't done before. I think I could probably go and do an Ironman faster than I've done it so far. I want to do some more. I did a Spartan Ultra, which is like a 50-kilometer long obstacle course race a couple of years back. I really want to do another one of those. That was wild. That was so much fun. But they're hard to find a venue that's kind of nearby and that works for me. So I'll be doing hopefully more of each of those. I have a bucket list thing, which is I would like to try to do a channel swim one day. I feel like that's something you can do as you get older because it's super easy on the joints. So maybe if at some point I can't run anymore or something like that, hopefully before then, but maybe after then I could try to do something like that. That'd be really cool. There's you could do the Øresund channel swim, which is from like Denmark to Sweden. That'd be really cool. Or there's also the Gibraltar swim. So you can go from Gibraltar down to Morocco, which would be pretty wild too. I think each of those take like 5 or 6 hours of swimming nonstop at a good pace. So it would take me years to train up for that. But as I do these Ironmans, I'm seeing my times improve. So maybe you never know.
Sounds like you are looking for adventures in fitness, no?
I hope so. I'd like to think so.
You call in your blog also something like this, no? Adventure-driven fitness.
Yeah, that's right. My website, company, blog is Adventure Driven Fitness. adventuredrivenfitness.com. That's definitely been, I suppose I could have called it family driven fitness too. I mean, that was definitely a major motivation for me, but adventure is kind of also something that's been with me my entire life. I've been traveling ever since I graduated from college. Even before that, I suppose, to some degree. And I'm an American who lives in Denmark right now, and I lived in Honduras on a Caribbean island for like 2.5 years. And I love to travel, and I was into scuba diving for a while and different things like that. So it just kind of spoke to me, that I wanted to stay fit to do adventures with my family. So
And one topic, for sure, many people are interested more in details about the diet. There's always a discussion about fueling the sport performance with more carbs or more fats. Now we told about the keto diet, which is fat-based, very minimal carbs, and also high-level performance. Not a big part of this diet, but the traditional way is more high carb. Or how do you manage this? Or do you have different strategy for endurance training or race, and different strategy for a strength training?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a pretty wide open range that people can do and have it work out for them. So some of this comes down to a little bit of like personal taste and interest at least to some degree. In my experience, doing ultra distances without a lot of carbs is god awful. It's horrible. I hate it. Everything about it. I'll never do it again. So when I'm training for like an Ironman or something like that, I tend to eat a higher carb diet, which is, for me, it's fruits, veggies, and whole grains. So it's still, it's still, I think, what generally is considered a very nutritious and healthy diet. And it's not crazy. Like, again, it's mostly fruits and veggies and then some grains as needed. For strength training, if I'm just trying to like gain, strength or size, and I'm not as worried and I'm not doing a ton of cardio, then kind of like to have my fats up a little bit. Fats are good, obviously, for like hormonal health and some stuff like that. So it helps with all the anabolic sex hormones and stuff. Yeah, and then I guess no matter what, I keep my protein up pretty high. Definitely a higher protein diet all year.
What does it mean more or less in numbers compared to your body weight, for example? How much protein, or you count or you don't count?
I don't often count, to be honest with you. If I'm doing a lot of training, a lot of mixed modality training, the absolute most I'd ever shoot for would be like 1 gram per pound. But I think less than that's usually fine. There's one of the guys I studied under, and I have my strength training and nutrition certification through, is Menno Henselmans, and he's done a ton of research on how much protein you need just for like building muscle, and it's usually a little bit lower than most people think. Maybe I can't think it off the top of my head for some reason, but yeah, it's less than 1 gram per pound. So for me, I think it's like 130 grams or something like that. Maybe is what I shoot for most of the time, to be honest with you. It's not that much. As far as like how I actually do it, I kind of have my breakfast and lunch on a pretty strict routine. It's like I've got like 2 or 3 go-to breakfasts and maybe 3 or 4 go-to lunches. So that's pretty much set. And that's maybe 35, 40 grams of protein in each of those. And then dinner is always going to have a generous portion of protein, some sort of meat, almost certainly, chicken, maybe eggs, but, yeah. Another way I sometimes tell people too is like something like maybe a quarter of the meal should be a protein-rich food, right? Like if you picture like a plate, maybe like a quarter of it should be protein. That usually works out to like at least 20 to 25% of your calories will be protein. That's usually enough for most people. The needs go up a little bit higher, I think, if you're doing a lot of stuff because of just needing to recover. But
yeah, and you noticed if you were training more for the Ironman, you need to go up with the protein, or not really? Because it's also tissues and sort of.
Yeah, it's the protein requirements are highest when you're strength training, and they go down a bit when you're doing endurance training only. But when you're doing like mixed, like if you're doing like training for an obstacle course race, like a long distance obstacle course race, it's just the volume, right? You're just tearing your body apart so much. It'd probably be like the same thing with like CrossFit or something like that. So there's kind of like there's a minimum amount of protein you need to build muscle, which is going to be like 1.8 grams per kilogram per day, right? I just double checked. Couldn't remember that for some reason off the top of my head. And that's probably like a minimum you need to build muscle, right? Or If you're doing that, you're good. But what ends up happening is like you can do more training than that, right? You're not going to gain more muscle than that, but you can do more training than that. So if you're like all of a sudden you're doing that plus a bunch of cardio, then you just need more protein just to fix all the shit you're breaking, right? Sorry, do you mind if I cuss on your podcast? But so you just have to do more protein because of that. So at that point, that's when I would step up to more like 1 gram per pound or 2.2 per kilogram or whatever. So yeah, but for endurance, it would be even less probably because if you're for a true endurance athlete, you kind of want to be on the smaller side. So it doesn't require as much protein to kind of preserve muscle mass and all that.
Okay, so yeah, there is an optimal level and no sense to eat more than necessary. But also we need to reach this minimum threshold level to be able to recover from the things.
It also helps with appetite too. Like eating a higher protein diet, up to a point anyway, seems to help with appetite. If you eat a really low protein diet, like it's hard on your appetite for sure. Again, this is something else that the research kind of suggests it has like a kind of a maximum effective dose. So again, if you go above like the 1.8 per kilo or 1 gram per pound, once you get above something like that, there's maybe no benefit to suppressing your appetite. But if your goal is to try to be lean and staying lean is something that someone struggles with, definitely a higher protein diet can help.
Yeah, so it's what bodybuilders are doing in the peaking period now. So
I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, I mean, this is what bodybuilders are doing. I'm sure they want to
Definitely.
competitions. Yeah. And in general, I want to ask you what would be the top 3 lifestyle or training advice what you would give to anybody, which they can start immediately without crazy investment or equipment, which keep them healthy and fit in the long run. It can be anything around training or diet or sleeping habits. Just curious, what are your top 3?
Well, maybe we'll do one of each. How's that? So I guess how about for diet? Eat a protein-rich food at every meal. That should be achievable I think that's pretty achievable for most people. That'll, again, reduce your appetite, help you preserve your muscle mass, help you with recovery. There was even a recent study that said that higher protein diets are better for longevity. So yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer. I think everyone should be doing. Everyone always hears that, so I'm not sure how much that helps. But if I had to say, hey man, fix your diet, that'd be way up there. Also, maybe eat lots of fruits and vegetables. Again, everyone knows these things, but they, as far as diet goes, there's no silver bullets. You kind of have to do the things that everyone says. Lifestyle, put the phone away an hour before bedtime. Out of reach, gone. That would be a game changer for most people, I think, and help them get like a good amount of sleep. I know at least for a lot of people in the West and in the United States, they're probably not sleeping enough and they're overstressed, and the phone causes both stress and reduces your sleep quality and duration. So yeah, just get rid of it an hour before bed. For training, strength training. I don't know, like that's got to be the number one thing most people probably could place to start. I suppose if someone's just in love with the idea of doing cardio, you could start there. But the nice thing about starting with strength training is once you've built your strength and some muscle, it's kind of easy to preserve that and then add in the cardio after. Whereas if you develop a bunch of cardio and then you want to try to add in the strength training, it's a little hard to do it that direction. Cardio tends to fall off a little bit quicker than muscle and strength. So it's a good order, I think.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I would take all these 3 tips. I think similar. And yeah, we are slowly to the end of our talk today. But, thank you for joining and very interesting.
My pleasure.
Maintain this fit lifestyle and where the people can reach you and how you can help them.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think we mentioned earlier, my website is adventuredrivenfitness.com. I've got a blog there where I try to post every week. The articles are pretty deep dives, evidence-based dives with a lot of research and stuff. So if you're into kind of seeing the behind the scenes nut and bolts of how things work, that's a really cool resource. And you can sign up for my newsletter and just get those articles straight to your inbox. You can do all that at the website, adventuredrivenfitness.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at chris.redig.
Yeah, cool. I absolutely recommend his Instagram. I also find him there. It's also always very motivating, and I find out we both practice the natural movements, studied for certifications. Yeah, both of us like the endurance part, obstacle races, strength training, of course. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, and I definitely have find a lot of inspiration in your account as well. So it's mutual.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, and hope to see you doing Ironmans and obstacle races 20, 30 years later as well.
I hope so. Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Take care.